Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to something a little bit different. We'll call it an overview of Level 0 Extraction. This is an upcoming extraction shooter with a really cool theme to it, this sort of research facility versus monsters, something that honestly appeals to me personally a lot more than something like Tarkov. No, that's nothing against Tarkov, I'm just not really a modern warfare kind of person. And funnily enough, the more vets I talk to about that, the more they feel the same as well, but that's a different topic altogether. Essentially, they had a closed beta test this weekend that I was invited into, and I captured some footage and played with some mates, so I thought I'd just showcase this and put it on your radar. I think the aesthetic is absolutely king, and all of the moving parts on paper are really quite wonderful. It really does appeal to me. However, in practice, I found some of the controls to be a bit sluggish and floaty. Now that could well be because I'm an Australian on US servers, but as someone, I'm not a spring chicken. I grew up in the high ping days of lag and all that. You can usually tell the difference between engine sluggishness and lag, and I don't believe it was really like a lag problem. And the issue, we'll talk more about the game, but I thought I'd just get this point out of the way. The issue was that because of the high lethality and the sort of punchiness, when the encounter does happen, when you do show down with other people or the monster or whatever, it's going to be over in 15 seconds. So you really got to get those controls tight and clean. And sadly, when rubber hit the road and you've finally bashed heads with an enemy, a lot of the time it kind of felt like a bit of a shit fight, and shooting weapons and that didn't really feel fun. A lot of the weapons, you obviously have melee axes and things like that, but you have a lot of guns which are sort of kind of breech loading, single shot sort of affairs, which exacerbates the problem of good luck landing a shot when it all goes off. So yeah, and now look, I could be totally wrong, but that was sort of my take on it, that the concept is brilliant. I love everything here, but the execution of the pointy end of the action needs a lot more work. But that will come. I would argue that fine-tuning the ones and zeros and the moving parts of the actual method is probably a bit easier to clean up and implement than coming up with high concept ideas. So yeah, it is essentially an extraction shooter. I say shooter lightly because you don't do a lot of shooting. It's leaning more into a sort of, I suppose you could say, horror aesthetic. There's some cutscenes and all that, and they're really cool, and it all really tickles me, the whole idea that there's this alien virus that they've been messing with, and there's a facility and it's all gone wrong, and you're essentially like a mercenary team going in to loot and get back out. It's a really good setup. It's very, very clever. And again, like I said, very much appeals to me a lot. You can set up a 3-stack of mercenaries, and I believe you can 2-stack the monsters. And I think all said in one instance, I could be wrong. It's very hard to tell in the limited time that I've had with this. I think you can get sort of 2 human 3-stacks that can kill each other if they want, and then 2 monsters. Nature of something like this is if you queue as one of the scientist sort of teams, whether solo or with 3, you're going to get into a match immediately, and queuing as the alien is sort of the attractive scav run single person, dare I say, the more inclined to want to ruin someone's fun than be on the ruining end of it. So the monster queue was kind of astronomical at times, maybe up to 10 minutes, that sort of thing. But yeah, ultimately it's split into 2 loops from the human perspective. One, you're in the Tarkov inventory. It is very, very much like Tarkov, and that's going to be the touchstone because that is the heavy inspiration. You've got different shops, you've got some trade offers, you've got reputation. It's all very clean at the moment. We'll see, because again, one of my criticisms of Tarkov is I find all the inventory and shop management nonsense to just be sort of overwhelming. It's not necessarily a Tarkov problem, but you have these games that have a live service model or whatever, they're not just release, play, pack it up. It's one of those things that if you were to pick up Tarkov now, it is so incredibly steep, and in a kind of way, they expect that you've kept up with it for the past couple of years of updates and iterations so you can keep stride with it. Again, not necessarily a Tarkov specific problem. I'm assuming something like Dota and that would be the same as well. So it's kind of cool being in at the ground floor of this, where the stores and the economy is still relatively graspable and simple, but working within that framework of this dude buys these things and this dude buys that thing, and it's really good. It just grays out and highlights, and from a UI perspective, they're on the right path. It's a good start. And so you go in, you've got some safe slots. You don't explicitly have alpha containers or anything, but you've got 4 slots that are out of bounds safe. which is fine. You know, that again, I feel like that's become sort of a genre-specific standard now, and you pick up all sorts of bloody, you know, ear thermometers and of all the things to get excited about and be caught screaming by your neighbours like, oh boys, I found another $1,500 ear thermometer, that's going in me pocket. Like, that wasn't on my bingo card for the year. So you just go around scrubbing up things. These monsters that you fight are like sensitive to the light. So you've got your torch, but a lot of your inventory actually floats around flares, glow sticks, that sort of thing, light traps. So it's cool that, you know, I'm not a fuddy-duddy about violence in video games at all. But it is kind of a little bit of a cop-out that 99% of games and their action core loop is shoot the bad guy in the face. Like, I get that that's sort of the accepted culture and standard, but it's cool when you see games trying something different. And so the guns and the axes and the actual weaponry in this seem much more aimed at fighting other mercenaries in your kind of, call it, traditional human versus human combat. And it is one of those things, if the monsters are gonna rush you and have a bloody go, I would rather have a flare in my inventory than one of the guns, because you can pop that flare, rush up and burn out the alien, and then he basically respawns. On the alien side, they've got a couple of different upgrades that they sort of charge over time. It's not very well explained, but you get the feel for it. It's almost like an in-level XP bar. You can go around and pick up certain eggs that will charge your bar. So there's sort of it kind of reminds me a little bit of Evolve, actually, if you remember that, where it's the 4 versus 1 monster hunting game. Loved that game. That flopped, but everyone I've ever spoke to loved it. So you stomp around and you want to collect eggs and that sort of stuff, and it's a fairly large base. It's well designed. Again, have I said how much I love the aesthetic and the base and the environment? I love that sort of, you know, Arctic facility research aesthetic so much. But you charge your bar up and you get more abilities where you can sort of like EMP blast to knock out torches. You can spit on them to knock out flares, so there is a clever interplay. I just feel that like the execution still needs cleaning up as far as the controls. There's all sorts of other things as well, like if you die as a human, you can come back as a little drone and help escort your teammate around, which I think is brilliant from a fundamental gameplay design. The idea of extraction shooters, or any sort of game where you have death permanency on a team member, and so he has to sit there and bloody swipe on fucking Grinder or something like that while he waits for you to hurry up and finish and die, I just think is untenable and is not really reasonable. So that's kind of cool. So if you're the last man left, it's only so terrifying because you've got these 2 drunk bloody drones cruising around with you as well, trying to help. They're very low impact, but they're still involved, and you're still a team until the very last man dies. And, you know, there's light switches you can turn on. You can overcharge the power grid by accident if you draw too much, which is really, really clever. So you're going to turn on every light switch as you go, and at a certain point it hits a threshold and it blacks out the entire base, including your map. Different extracts for like zip lines and things like that. So look, it's got all the fundamentals so right, and it's got a lot of original stuff twisting the genre as well. But again, it's an early build, so when I say that the actual action, combat, whatever you'd like to call it, the pointy end, I called it before, which is probably the best part. When it finally comes to, you know, swords, it's a bit rough, but it is still an early build. I'm sure they'll just clean it up as they go. Anyway, like I said, a bit of an unusual overview, but I sunk a few hours into it over the weekend and I thought I'd take a chance to show it off. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.